Well, welcome back to Snetterton, everybody, ahead of the fourth race of the season, our second today for the Bell Sports Challenge Series. The glorious grid of Ferraris are already lined up. The BMW electric safety car is at the front of the queue in advance of what will be a rolling start for the fourth race of the season in this new series for 2023, which caters for a whole range of different Ferrari typos in reality. So you race against cars of the same TPO. So if it's a 360, that's who you're racing against. If it's a 430, that's who you're racing against. Then we've got the 458s and the 488s on the grid as well, albeit the non-Evo specification, not the latest specification of 488s. Still beautiful conditions here. We're hovering around 20 degrees now, which means the track temperature is going to be heading towards the 30s there or thereabouts. Piers Pryor joins me in the commentary box. Piers, we had some good racing, not necessarily a front in the race earlier on because Peter Smith ran away with the lead, but towards the tail end, some brilliant battles going on.
There really were some brilliant battles going on. We had a mistake from a driver, which then ended up backing into the pack, and then we saw the resurgence through the field. And also there was two, I think it was it 360s that were fighting it out at the back of the field.
Tim Cairns and Nick Carey.
There you go. Yeah, that was it, and it was good to watch.
We had plenty of place changes on that final lap as well, didn't we? Yeah. Mick Dwayne gaining places, Giuseppe Coletti losing places. So yeah, we'll see what happens in this particular one. We should be able to guide you through the grid and the way that they will line up for this second race, because it is based on the finishing positions from the race earlier on today. Now, there are a couple of cars that ran into trouble in qualifying, one ran into trouble in the race, so we've lost a couple throughout the course of the day, but it should still be good racing. Peter Smith starts from pole position as a race winner from earlier on today, and Darren Goes lines up alongside. Row 2 of the grid is Richard Dougal, and for company he has got Matthew Wilton sitting alongside. And then as we head on to row number 3, it is Michael O'Sullivan and Mick Dwayne that share the third row of the grid, with row 4 being comprised by Tim Cairns and Giuseppe Coletti on row number 4, and the fifth row of the grid will be Nick Carey, who is on his own now because we had problems for Vance Kearney's car in race number 1, and there were problems for Nigel Jenkins, who'd qualified on the front row of the grid this morning but didn't appear for race 1 and has been withdrawn from race 2. And also Chris Compton Goddard, I only ever saw his car on the end of a tow rope coming down the pit lane, so I don't think he even got a qualifying lap in before problems befell him. We've got the grid of cars just working their way around the circuit. Now, we did have, for the race earlier on, we had 2 green flag laps, didn't we, for the race earlier on?
We did.
I wonder if we might get the same this time through.
Yeah, I wonder if we do. It's a bit warmer now, and obviously they've had a race this morning, so potentially maybe just one. And it is a rolling start in this race, isn't it, Mark? So we'll see what happens towards the end of this race. But regardless, last time we had a nice clean start, other than the car that unfortunately mildly caught fire, which was quickly arrested and sorted out by the marshalling team, which is why we had a safety car period. But yeah, it was good. It was a good, clean start to the race last time. Hopefully the same thing again.
Yep, let's hope so. So the race earlier on today, Peter Smith secured victory by 17.25 seconds in the end, and it was a very similar gap back actually from Darren Goes, who was in second place, back to Richard Dougal, because that was about 18 seconds between those two. But Richard Dougal was only 2/10 ahead of Mark Wilton when they came over the start-finish line. That was on corrected times, because Mark Wilton actually finished third on the road, but was given a 5-second penalty for some sort of transgression. But then after that, the likes of Mick Dwayne, Tim Cairns, Giuseppe Coletti, Nick Carey, all 4 of those cars were separated by just about 4 seconds in the end, and a lot of those position changes occurred on the very final lap. So looking forward to seeing what goes on at the tail end of the field for this one, and hopefully Darren Goes might be able to give Peter Smith a bit more of a run for his money, as the 2 488s, I'm sure, will probably battle for first and second places once more. They are going to do a second formation lap, so in answer to the question, there we go, they come back over the start finish line. The 30 minutes hasn't started ticking away, so yeah, it's going to be a second formation lap to try and build those tyre temps.
Yeah, it looks like Matthew Wilton's got his full beams on, so clearly intent on going forwards in this race.
Well, he will, I'm sure, want to pick off Richard Dougal. I don't know whether the 5-second penalty was for track limits or whether the 5-second penalty was something to do with him being out of position at the restart following the safety car period. I simply don't know, but yeah, it does mean that he dropped off the overall podium on corrected time, so he will want to spin that the other way around and finish on the podium on merit this time. Yeah,
that'll be the goal for him. It'd be great to get an overall podium. Nice that there's different groups and classes in this one, with the groups that we have, what is it, 1, 3 and 4, or 1, 2 and 4 out there today. There is of course a group 3 with no cars in this one and that group, but you can also go for the outright podium as well, because all of these cars, despite their different ages, are with the spread of driving ability as there is in any series. It's quite good that you can race against cars in your own group and also other groups.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and it does scoop up a lot of Ferraris that otherwise wouldn't have a home now to be able to race. So they all race largely in challenge specifications, so 360 challenge cars in Class 1, 430s in Class 2, 458s in Class 3, 488, the non-Evo variant in Class 4. But there is a Class 5 as well, so we don't have any cars in it, but that's for Ferrari vehicles which are homologated according to current or expired GT regulations. And that also scoops up any other modified Ferrari paddle shift cars as well. So there is a 5th class that you can have as well, which is an extra catch-all again almost.
So if you've got one of those cars lying around at home and you want to get on track, this is the place to be for it, because you'll have a good group of other Ferraris to race against, and some of the best circuits in the UK throughout the series as the series visits different tracks as well.
Yeah, and Bell Sport and Classic, who are based just outside of St Albans, do a brilliant job of promoting this new series this year. They're firmly behind it, and I know the series coordinator Tom King has worked very hard to ring up the people that have these cars, probably gathering dust in their garage to say, come and join us, It's a friendly environment. Yes, of course it's competitive because it's motor racing, but everybody's out there to have fun, and there's no championship points to worry about either. So you can drop in for a race and maybe disappear off and do other things if you've got busy business commitments, and pop back into the series later on in the year. It
really is a friendly place to be as well, because I've visited the Bell Sport awning at Donington, I believe it was, when I chatted to Tom King for the first time, and everyone was chipping in, having a good time, sitting out in the sun. And today we're going racing in the sun as well, so it'll be great for those on the grandstand behind the shot that we can just see there, watching these awesome Ferraris go around the circuit on a lovely early summer day.
So the black and white and pink car, Peter Smith, alongside the yellow and black car of Darren Goes on row number 1. It's white and light green for Richard Dougal and red with the black roof for Matthew Wilton. We get the 4th race of the season underway, and it looks as though Darren Goes is not that slow away on the run up towards Richie's corner. Is he going to be able to sweep across the nose of Peter Smith? No, he can't. But we do have a change for 3rd place, because Matthew Wilton at the wheel of his 488 goes through and ahead of the 360 of Richard Dougal. So the 488's to the 4 in the early stages. Race 1 winner Peter Smith leads the way. Darren Goes is second. Now Mick Twain dived up the inside there, and that was up the inside of Michael O'Sullivan. So decisive move for the man from Newark in the Lincolnshire-Nottinghamshire border to squeeze his way through at the wheel of the number 77 car. That's the car that had the spin in race 1 and spent a good chunk of time recovering. Yes, it recovered well to get some of the positions back that they lost, but that was a good move into the Wilson hairpin on the first lap. Did well to dive late on the brakes and still make the apex and not wash wide afterwards, even on the first lap, when not all the tyres, brakes and engine temperatures are completely at optimum quite yet. Yeah, so that was a 360 up the inside of the 430, and now Mick Twain will look to try and build a bit of momentum and pull away, and it does look as though already that yellow car is pulling away from this number 8 at 430. Now, this is where I know I'm getting old. It doesn't seem that long since the 430 was the current specification of car that you used to see racing in things like the British GT Championship and GT racing around the world. Well, it's now about 4 or 5 iterations old, isn't it, with the introduction of the 296? So scary how time just sort of flashes by. Down the Bentley Straight, lead pair pulling away once more. Matthew Wilton with his lights ablaze, as you picked out on the formation lap, trying to pull away from Richard Dougal. There goes Mick Twain, who hasn't as yet really put a great deal of daylight between himself and the number 8 car of Michael O'Sullivan that sits behind. Yeah, we saw Mick Twain in the previous race. Was pushing hard. He had that small spin, but afterwards was often lighting up the rear tyres and slithering out of the corners, and it's great to see all these Ferraris are very powerful machines, rear-wheel drive of course, and yeah, you put your foot down a bit too hard and you'll certainly leave some marks on the circuit. Yeah, I mean they're quite difficult cars to drive in some respects. If you had a current GT3 specification Ferrari, you could argue it's an easier car to drive, because the balance of performance you would have in a GT car means that it's not utilising all of the power it could have, whereas there's less aero in, say, a challenge spec car, and you actually have more power as well, don't you? So yeah, they're tricky cars to drive, but really rewarding when you get them right. Yeah, more power, less aero, so you're travelling faster in a straight line, then you have to brake down to a slower speed, and there's a lot more. I think is it different springs and I think electronics, and potentially they're slightly heavier. I think they are. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot more to do potentially in these than a GT3 car, but lap time's not too dissimilar, and they're fully at full tilt. It's the way they achieve them that differs, isn't it? Yes. So leading pair starting to break away. Peter Smith stretching the legs on the race leading car, putting a bit more daylight between himself and the number 22 car of Darren Goes, as they head round through Hamilton and on towards Oggies on their second lap of the race. We've still got Matthew Wilton there in third place, but he did have Richard Dougal within 0.8 of a second of him as they came over the start-finish line, so it's not all done and dusted just as yet between Matthew Wilton and Richard Dougal. Mick Dwayne was there in 5th place ahead of Michael O'Sullivan. Then it was Giuseppe Colotti, who's up to 7th now, which means that Tim Cairns has dropped to 8th, and Nick Carey completes the top 9. But you can see, yeah, lead 2 getting away. Not a bad fight still for 3rd and 4th. That's certainly not resolved.
No, certainly not resolved at all. And again, you mentioned the cars doing the lap times in very different ways. Potentially some of the older challenge cars might actually be slightly lighter than the newer ones. So that white car we're seeing there, is it the 430 or is it 360?
That's 360.
That's the 360. It might potentially be quite a bit lighter, so maybe faster in the middle section. But then the newer car, the red car in front of Shot that we've got there, slightly more power maybe, and maybe a bit more slippery down the straight. So yeah, interesting to see how these cars sort of ebb and flow as the circuit goes on. You can see almost evident there around Coram as the number 83 white, the 360 actually closes up once again, but then watch the gap open out a little bit down the main straight. Yeah,
the fresh and fruity back car of Richard Dougal, which is the company that Wayne Mars runs as well, who was a double winner at Donington Park, but Wayne not on the entry list for this weekend. 25 minutes to go as they head round through the right-hander at Ritchie's corner and start to head down in towards the heavy braking area for the Wilson hairpin. And you can see there that Matthew Wilton sort of outbraked himself a little bit there heading in towards that corner. Easy to do. The one good thing is there's plenty of sort of tarmac for you to, if you do make a small mistake there, because you're braking from such a high speed down to such a low speed, you can run a little bit wide. And yes, it compromises you, but it's not so you're going to disappear off into the grass or into the scenery.
And you can see on the back of the car there's a gap where a rear light once was that removed itself from the car in the previous race. But you mentioned there is a lot of runoff area there at the Wilson hairpin, as is there here at the Agostini hairpin. There's a lot of extra tarmac on the way in because they know that they're big stops, so the circuit designers have put extra tarmac in there to keep people on the road and keep them racing despite small mistakes that might happen.
Yeah, so Mick Dwayne nearly made a small mistake at that very point because the number 77 car didn't exactly hug the curb and grab the apex there, which is putting him under increasing amounts of pressure from the car that sits behind, which is Michael O'Sullivan. We've also got Matthew Wilton sitting there in 3rd place, who just cannot shake away Richard Dougal. So the leader's disappearing ever more up the road now. Down towards the bottom of the Bentley Straight comes the squabble for 3rd and 4th position. Mick Dwayne in 5th place, still feeling the pinch a little bit from the 430 of Michael O'Sullivan that sits behind. And this is exactly what we're talking about. Different T-posts all racing together. 360, I should say, 360 of Mick Dwayne fighting away with the 430 that sits behind him.
Yes. You say different T-pose?
Types, yeah, T-po.
T-po, is that Italian for type?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. You learn something new every day. So the different types of Ferraris out there. And I think what we're seeing right here in front of us with this battle for 3rd place overall between Wilton and Dougal is the classic thing is I think Dougal actually has the outright lap time pace advantage over Wilton. But because that red Ferrari is slightly faster in a straight line, Dougal can't execute that pace because he's getting held up in the corners. And as soon as you get to the straight, pulls away, so potentially might see if there's a mistake from Wilton and Dougal gets through, he might then stretch his legs and drive away in 3rd place. But it's going to hopefully make for a good race for the remaining 23 minutes.
Yeah, let's hope that is the case. Now Peter Smith, the race leader, is already lapping about 0.3 of a second quicker than he did in race 1 earlier on today, because he's just gone through the race leader with a nearly 5-second advantage now and has popped in a 1:58.911 second lap. Well, he was 1:59.2, almost 1:59.3 in the race earlier on today. So track temperature may well have risen, as we do have a change this time. Michael O'Sullivan comes from a long way back up the inside of Mick Dwayne in towards Agostini, but gets the car stopped, gets it turned into the apex, and the 430 goes through and ahead and up into what will be 5th.
That was a really nice move into Agostini hairpin there, just straightening the braking zone. Don't worry about turning, because any amount of turning you do scrubs off or reduces the amount of braking potentially you have in the car. Get it to the apex, get it stopped, and then it was quite good to see him come out narrow as well, because when you come out narrow, you're just basically blocking off the opportunity for a switchback manoeuvre, and yeah, that's a good move.
Yeah, so now he'll hope he can build on that and begin to pull away at this stage. So there is 3rd and 4th heading in towards Brundle and Nelson. The newly acquired 5th place of Michael O'Sullivan, followed by Mick Dwayne, who now completes the top 6, but Mick still will be leading Class 1 at the moment, so he's still the leading 360. Ran a little bit wide though, didn't he, coming out of Brundle and Nelson in the yellow number 77 car that time through. So Mick Dwayne still leading the class, but what he wants to do is try and not lose too much ground to the car that's just taken the place away.
We know there's absolutely no lack of commitment from Mick Dwayne. We saw in the previous races this battle for third place is hotting up. It was a good exit from the 83 of Dougal. Not going to be able to actually affect a manoeuvre down the start-finish straight due to those different T-pose of car with this slightly less powerful 360 behind. But yeah, we know that there's no lack of commitment from Dwayne. We saw a number of times in the last race, and of course ultimately leading to a small mistake which dropped him further down the field. But he's right back on it in this one and hoping to make a position very soon as we see a bit of a wiggle from the car as it went into Riches, which is a very fast part of the circuit, and now we're back to the battle for third place between Wilton and Dougal, which is still going on. Yeah,
intriguing battle, isn't it, between the pair of them? But the one good thing for Matthew Wilton is he knows if he can get off the corner quickly, he's always going to have a good run to the next corner because he's slightly quicker in a straight line than the older 360 that sits behind him. But it's not going to stop Richard Dougal having another nibble as they head up towards Agostini. And we've got the battle that we had in race 1 also continuing as well. Tim Cairns and Nick Carey, their two 360s, have been very evenly matched in race 1, and guess what? They're back together in race 2 as well.
Good to see those two continuing their battle from race number 1. They are two very similar looking Ferraris, but are ever so slightly different. But they are both novices, so both in their one of their first 6 races on their racing licence, and having a great battle once again. That's a great introduction to their racing career for both of them, to have such a tight fight between two very evenly matched drivers, even towards the rear end of the field.
Yeah, they look very slightly different at the front end because the front bumper on the car of Nick Carey's car almost looks like a 430 bumper on the front of that car, doesn't it? But yeah, they're both 360s, busy squabbling away for what will be at the moment 3rd and 4th in Class 1, which is for the 360 Challenge specification cars. We've had the first third of the race. We've had also Peter Smith, our race leader, go even quicker on the lap that he has just completed. He's just flashed his way over the start-finish line with a time of 1 minute 58.565 from him that time through. So the lead advantage now grows to 9 3/4 seconds between himself and Darren Goes, the number 22 car in 2nd place. And Darren Goes is pretty much on his own in 2nd place. But this fight that we're concentrating on at the moment is for 8th and 9th position. Tim Cairns still just ahead of the number 73 car of Nick Carey, and Nick Carey frustratingly too far back to properly attack at the moment.
Is there a lap? Has Carey dropped a lap, or is that just a transponder issue? Because it seems like on the timing screens there's a lap between them.
Yeah, it does look as though there's a lap between them, but I don't think he's dropped a lap.
No, I don't think so either. Maybe that's a transponder issue, or maybe we've missed something. So let's have a look back at this battle up further up the field. It looks like a move into the Wilson hairpin from Dwayne. He's had a look at the inside, not quite managed to pull it off this time, giving the outside line to O'Sullivan.
Yeah, so he was very close there to sneaking his way through, but it wasn't quite going to be the case. I think the problem with Nick Carey's transponder is it stopped working. It was working and then it stopped because it's not giving us a sector time for him at all, which suggests that he's sort of stranded out on circuit. Well, he's not, because we can see him circulating still. So I think the electronic device that sits inside the car that sends a unique number to the timekeepers, which matches up with the driver name and gives you all of the data that you get. So if you ever log on to tsl-timing.com, you can see it all live. Then I think that little electronic box has just lost charge somewhere. So Mick Dwayne still shadowing the number 8 car of Michael O'Sullivan, who he lost out to on the previous lap. He was close to him through the Wilson hairpin, but by the time they get onto the top of the Bentley Straight, there's quite a gap between the pair of them again.
Maybe another example of just the ebbing and flowing of the two different cars, but we saw as Dwayne went into Hamilton's corner, which we got a nice directly behind shot, that Dwayne again was using all of the road, almost hanging the outside of the tyre over the edge of the circuit to open up the entry, so clearly pushing very hard. We're now looking back at our leader Smith, who again has the fastest lap of the race, and he is lapping out almost in a class of his own at the front of the field, putting out an 11.3 second gap with 13 minutes of this race gone, 17 minutes remaining, or just over 17 minutes remaining. It looks like barring either a mechanical or a large error, this is probably only going to go one way for the outright victory.
Yeah, he's certainly not put a wheel wrong as yet, has he, our race leader Peter Smith? And yeah, the lead advantage now up to 11.4 seconds, as good as. He was quick in qualifying, set some very quick times in qualifying, but just went beyond the circuit limits a few times. He was almost beyond them there,
yes,
heading out of Agostini. And because he went beyond the circuit limits in qualifying, if you do that, then what you do is you lose the lap time where you go beyond the circuit limits. Well, he did that twice, so he lost arguably 2 of his best laps in qualifying, so his 3rd quickest time was what counted, but it was still enough to give him pole in race number 1. He went on and set the fastest lap, lights the flag win, and at the moment that's exactly what he's repeating in race 2.
Yeah, doing very, very well, repeating that pace he had in qualifying, and just needs to keep an eye out for those track limits, because as much as he has an 11.5-second gap, or maybe even 12 by the end of this lap, you can quite easily, you know, I think you get one warning, or you're allowed to go off once, then you get a second go is I think a warning flag. The third one is a 5-second penalty, then a 10-second penalty, and then a drive-through. So
they become ever more draconian, don't they, the penalties?
Exactly.
Stay within the confines of the circuit is the answer.
Yeah, because you could quite easily have a drive-through, and then it would fall well down the field, because a drive-through will cost you at least probably half a minute.
Yeah, it's 18 seconds to drive from one end of the pit lane at Snetterton to the other at the pit lane speed limit. Plus, you've got to decelerate and accelerate,
yeah,
so you're looking at 30 seconds for sure.
Not far off, which would at this stage of the race still take him outside of the top 3. He'll be pretty close, but he'll still push on and have to be... Oh, Dwayne has spun once again.
That's the exit of Oggy's again, isn't it? That's where he had the spin earlier on, I think.
It was, yes. So he's done a very similar thing. I mean, it is a bit bumpy at Oggy's. It's quite a difficult corner. You have to go in quite hard, and it sort of opens out on the exit. You turn for a long time, so the left rear tyre definitely heats up. But taking a while to get back up to racing speed. He's still off the racing line, so potentially might be a residual issue.
Yeah, he just seemed to be a bit slow to get going again there. Not quite sure what the problem was, but that was certainly in the same corner as he had the problem earlier on. He's up to full speed now as he heads down the Bentley Straight, so no issue there. But he will have fallen to... Well, actually, I don't think he lost a place. I think he was in 6th before the spin, but he is still ahead of Giuseppe Coletti there. You can see the black car with the Italian tricolore emblazoned over the roof of it. So, yeah, it's just time lost for Mick Dwayne. Wouldn't have lost a position with that spin.
Yeah, such as the gap to him back to Coletti. But Coletti will be seeing that and will have seen that the bright yellow car of Dwayne has dropped back towards him, and maybe he will have spurred him on and might find some extra time, and that could be a gap that comes together, especially if Dwayne is carrying any issues from that spin or what caused that spin, because of course we don't know whether that was purely a human error or if there was something else that went on there.
Yep, so over the start-finish line comes Giuseppe Coletti. Another novice cross on the back of his car. You'll need to watch his mirrors as well, because he's slowly getting reeled in by the red number 7 360 in the hands of Tim Cairns, and that was what happened in the race earlier on as well, wasn't it, where Coletti sort of seemed to lose a bit of pace relative to others around him, and he finally got picked off by Mick Dwayne and Tim Cairns over the course of the final couple of laps of the race earlier on today. So he'll be conscious to learn from that and maybe make sure that he hangs on to the place he's got, which is 7th position currently and 2nd in Class 1.
Yeah, it could have been he potentially with the tyre pressures, or maybe even the way they set the cars up, he could have just gone off a little bit towards the end of the race, or maybe the other drivers around him just found a little bit of extra time, because not a huge, I don't think many of these drivers have had a huge amount of practice around the Snetterton 300 circuit in these cars recently, so they're all finding their feet kind of almost as they're driving, and you can see that reflected in a lot of the lap times as we go through the race. But it looks like there's a purple... Oh, no, it's in pit. I thought it was a purple final sector. No,
that's Nick Carey, I'm afraid. The number 73 car has come into the pit lane, so not entirely sure what the problem is with his car.
Spinner for Coletti. A spin for Coletti.
Yeah, where was that?
That is an exit of
Hamilton.
Yes, it is. It's into Oggy's, isn't it? So he must have potentially carried a bit too much speed and dropped a wheel potentially on the exit. That curb is quite aggressive on the exit of Hamilton, and if you hit it wrong on a rear-wheel drive car such as this, it just unsettles the car, and with the amount of power that these cars have got, which is what got to be over 400 horsepower, he's given the marshals a thumbs up to let them know that he's okay, which is very good of him, and unfortunately a small error is going to cost him a couple of positions.
Yep, so that is Giuseppe Coletti. Well, it's only cost him one now that Nick Carey's come into the pit lane. Yeah, so Tim Cairns will have snuck through because he was being put under pressure by Tim Cairns. So Tim is now down towards the bottom of the Bentley Straight.
Is that car going slowly?
It looks as though it might be as well, you know.
It's going very pulling off to the right-hand side. There must be an issue there.
Yeah, so that's the number 7 car. So that's Tim Cairns now that's got a problem potentially. Or is he? Oh, no, he's... No, he is indicating, right, okay, yeah, he's clearly got a problem. So Giuseppe Coletti now hasn't lost a place on that lap, and Tim Cairns is, I'm sure, destined for the pit lane. Or maybe was there a... Yeah, no, he's staying out of harm's way, isn't he? And he's about to get lapped by our race leader.
Sounds like someone else is just leaving the pit lane. Then maybe that is Carey, who's been seen to and is now going back out on the circuit.
Yep, so Nick Carey back out on track. I suspect his Space in the pit lane will be shortly taken up by Tim Cairns, who will head into the pit lane for assistance from the marshals. For Giuseppe Coletti, though, he needs to watch his mirrors now, though, because he's got the race leader closing up and about to scythe his way through and past. So that's 9 laps completed, and the new fastest lap of the race as well. That lap through for Peter Smith, 1 minute 58.414. That is now 0.8 of a second quicker than he managed in race 1.
Well, that's clearly finding some more pace in that car. In the track combination, as we mentioned, the drivers will be finding more and more time in the little bits of the corner, because it's all about, once you're at that sort of level of driving where you're getting towards the limit of grip in most corners, finding the tenths here and there, it just comes from braking 1 meter later, using a little bit more entry curb, or even turning in a bit later and carrying a couple of miles an hour faster here and there, and you'll then chip away at the times rather than being able to get the big gains per lap that potentially you might get at the beginning of a weekend, because as you get close to the ultimate performance of the car, being able to extract more performance out of it becomes more and more difficult, and the gains you get become smaller and smaller.
Well, we're nearly 2/3 of the way through the race now, and for our race leader, Peter Smith, he's still pushing on this lap. So he set the fastest lap of the race last time through, but through the first third of this lap, he has also gone quicker than anybody has been, including himself, over the course of the first third of the lap. So in other words, the first sector, because he's gone purple through that. He'd be heading down in towards Brundle and Nelson, and this is where the second sector of the lap finishes, and he's also quicker through there than he's previously been. So he's trying to wring the neck and get all of the performance out of his 488 at the moment, and he could, if he gets the third sector tidy and together, he could be on for another new fastest lap of the race this time through.
Yeah, when you say he's gone purple, he's not holding his breath in the car. It's of course on the timing screen that we have right in front of us. And for those of you who maybe aren't so familiar with the timing screens, often in Formula One, as they use the same sort of thing, purple sector's fastest sector of anyone in the race, green is your personal best, and then anything else is just either sort of white or yellow. But it's been a very, very good lap so far. Let's keep an eye on the timing screens and see if he can better his fastest lap so far.
Yeah, 1 minute 58.414 last time through. This time through as Peter Smith comes over the start-finish line and he breaks the beam. He'll just take a few seconds for that to update itself as it goes round through the Ritchie's corner. Bit of a delay, should be up by now, but it's still not there. He's got traffic to deal with in the meantime, so he'll be fully focused on that and won't worry about what the Delta is saying on his screens. But as he heads out of the Wilson hairpin, right, it finally comes in at 1 minute 57.586. So that is way quicker than his previous best lap as well. So that is now 1.5, nearly 1 3/4 seconds quicker than he went in race 1.
Yeah, he's going to struggle to beat that lap time on this one, because he's had to pass a back mark. I think that is the red 360 that may have come through the pits. Is that
Nick Carey, I think, yeah.
I think it is Nick Carey. So you maybe lost a little bit of time down towards Agostini, but still pushing on really on the edge of the circuit. That's leaving absolutely no margin for error into there. So clearly pushing on and enjoying getting extracting the lap time from that 488.
Yeah, you can see there, lap by lap at the bottom of the screen, as to what Peter Smith is doing relative to Darren Goes, who's there in second place. So he's anywhere between 2 and nearly 2.5 seconds a lap quicker over the course of the last few laps than Darren Goes. So that gap has now extended out by 6.5 seconds in just the last 3 laps. So it's now up to 23 seconds from first to second place. And guess what Peter Smith is doing on this lap? He's quicker than anybody through the first sector, quicker than anybody through the second sector. He could be on for another improved fastest lap.
A little wiggle out of the exit and Nelson, so clearly pushing on, trying to gain some time on the exit of the corners. And then it's the corners, long corners like this, where you can often gain and lose quite a lot of time, like Coram. If you're push ever so slightly too hard, sometimes it can feel like you go faster, but you actually go a little bit slower. Sometimes it's better off to be a little bit neater and tidier through the exit, but sometimes the cars like this, they reward a bit of hustle at lower speed corners. And
we'll come to the lap time in a few moments' time. Coram's one of those corners as well. In fact, it was a new improved lap time, 1 minute 56.998. He just keeps getting quicker and quicker and quicker. And Coram's one of those corners as well where you would expect to hug the curb all the way round would be the quickest line, but because you're then trying to turn through a tighter corner, sometimes it's better to take a wider arc through that corner and not necessarily hug the curb all the way through Coram, depending on the car you're in.
Yeah, of course. If you hug the curb or hug the white line all the way around, you end up getting to a position where you're having to do all of your turning while still braking for the left onto the start-finish straight, whereas a lot of cars, especially rear-engine GT cars, they will go in and sort of almost miss the first half of the apex, so you can just straight line the braking just that little bit, because it means you can brake that much later, and it means you're then transferring a little bit less weight from left to right as you then go into the left-hander onto the start-finish straight. And it's all these little bits and pieces that the driver coaches, which some of these drivers will be teaching them and helping them do, because it's something that might not be initially intuitive. You might think, well, the shortest line is around the inside, I can go flat out, so I'll just go around the inside. Whereas not always the way.
No, absolutely not. Back into the pit lane, I'm afraid to say, has come Nick Carey. So whatever the problem was with his car that brought him into the pit lane, he has not been able to get resolved. And at the moment, that means that it is going to be Giuseppe Coletti that is the last of the runners, because Tim Cairns is in the pit lane as well and hasn't reappeared. So we've lost the two red Ferraris that were doing battle with each other. Darren Goes is very much on his own again now in second place, because he is 28, nearly 29 seconds off the lead, but he's got 26 seconds in hand between the car behind, which is Matthew Wilton. So with 6.5 minutes to go, Darren Goes is looking a bit like race one, fairly secure for second place, I would say.
Wilton and Dougal aren't too far apart though, so that gap's still down to below 2 seconds, not directly fighting each other, but yeah, Goes is still pushing on. He's I think probably lost sight actually of Smith in the lead, and in the rear of shot he won't even be able to see his direct competitor behind. But again, part of the beauty of this championship for the drivers especially is that they can take their machinery which they've got and race it in a series that visits a lot of the best circuits in the UK. And yes, sometimes the cars might not be directly next to each other on circuit, but maybe we'll go to a different circuit somewhere else in the country and the cars might be a bit more evenly matched, and that might then end up meaning that there's a bit more battling that goes on. But for now, they're just enjoying smashing around the Snetterton 300 circuit, which is a very technical circuit and one that does take a lot of getting used to. There's a lot of corners around this circuit ever since they got the additional infield section, which added a different, I think, element to the circuit, and compared to when it used to go right here and Riches and then go 90 right back straight onto the back straight, where there's now the Wilson hairpin, which then lends itself into the infield. Yeah,
here's that squabble that you were talking about a few moments ago. Matthew Wilton still under pressure from Richard Dougal, but the 360 has been shadowing the 488 for a good period of time now, but always loses out with straight line speed. So 5 minutes to go. Over the start finish line they'll go, and it's still Matthew Wilton who is keen to hang on to the podium spot, that is managing to keep himself ahead of the 360. And again, you know, just got a close up there of the front end of the 488. You can see the extra aerodynamic devices and the little dive planes around the corners of that car, whereas the 360, you know, it's far more, it sounds I'm being derogatory, less refined. You know, it's not had the same amount of understanding of aerodynamics when that was produced as to what these little dive planes and all the little extra bits do that you see on the likes of the 488.
Yeah, and it's without being derogatory at all, Mark. It's just a fact of you know, motorsport.
Evolution.
Everything moves on, and everything, and as close, the closer and closer you get to almost a perfect sports car, you have to find the extra bits and pieces in smaller areas, because the layout hasn't changed drastically, has it?
No, I mean, even if you look at the rear wing of that 488, it's the traditional sort of rear wing where the uprights come up and the wing sits under it. And now what we have is the uprights come up and gooseneck, and they go over, because again, we know that affects the air differently over the back of the car, and that's more efficient than, say, the rear wing on that 488.
Yeah. Oh, are you okay there, Mark? We're just demolishing the commentary box, everyone at home. Don't worry about that. Mark's still here. He'll be back in a moment. But yes, you know, we see on a lot of the GT3 cars, so, you know, even the 488 GT cars, now the 296, as you mentioned, the gooseneck
wing, yeah,
where it kind of trails behind the rear wing and then attaches to the top, because the flow of the air on the top of the wing is a lot closer, or a lot less under tension and a lot less sensitive than the air underneath the wing. And if you have the wing attached underneath, yes, it's only a tiny difference. I mean, it was probably, what, 5 or 6 millimeters wide, the two struts. But of course, when you're fighting with other GT3 machinery and looking for hundreds and tenths, that 5 or 6 millimeters each side is like 10 centimeters of extra wing.
And the one thing is now is that, you know, when the 360 was produced, to understand all of this, you'd have had to build a scale model or put the car into the wind tunnel. Well, now we don't. You know, we just use computational fluid dynamics and let the computers sort it out.
Easy for you to say, Mark. I call it CFD. Yes, because obviously computing power is, you know, year on year, you know, decade on decade is exponentially growing. So now the amount of CFD that, you know, even GT manufacturers like Ferrari will do is huge compared to, they wouldn't have even really thought about it a huge amount, other than just sort of experience when they were designing probably the 360. They thought, it's a very rudimentary, it's a nice, good-looking shape
car,
and cuts through the air. But all those fine little louvers and the little dive planes you mentioned, all GT3 cars have dive planes with actual wing end plates on the dive planes these days.
Well, I mean, as we're staying on Ferraris and aerodynamics, you look at the current Ferrari Formula 1 car and then look at what is my favourite car from 1989, the Ferrari Formula 1 car. Unbelievable difference. Yeah, leagues apart, and it's no different in the road car, is it? The same. So we've got 2 and a bit minutes to go. Back to the race that we've got going on. Peter Smith continues to lead. He's built a 40.7 second advantage now between himself and Darren Goes. His lap times have dropped off. Eventually he's decided that he's built enough of a margin now. He's pushed himself and the car as much as he needs to, and now it's the stage of consolidation. Okay, let's just wind it back a bit, and he's backed off by about 3 seconds on that last lap compared to what he had been doing. We still got this good fight going on for 3rd and 4th, though. Matthew Wilton and Richard Dougal never been that far apart. Now, there is a bit of traffic coming up as well that they're going to have to deal with, and that will be the number 48 car of Giuseppe Coletti.
Yeah, Giuseppe Coletti in that black car with the tricolore, as you said earlier on, is it? Because I said the Italian flag on top, and yeah, it's a very distinctive livery, and the only black car in the field for this round. Potentially we'll have some more, hopefully we'll have some more amazing Ferrari Cup cars over the rest of this series as it visits other venues. But we've also got the bright yellow car there, the number 22, of course. Darren Goes in 2nd place, still soldiering on, trying to beat his own lap times. And you mentioned a moment ago, so Smith just dropping lap times off a little bit, potentially after setting the fastest laps of the race, consecutive laps, maybe a little moment and thought, you know what, that's enough. Maybe scared himself a little bit, because these cars, they might look very much under control, but you do one thing slightly wrong and they are very much a beast.
Yep, absolutely. They'll soon bite you back, won't they? So down to the Bentley Straight for the penultimate time goes our race leader. I think he'll get over the start-finish line with more than a lap time in hand, potentially. Yeah, 50 seconds to go. Should be over the start-finish line before the clock ticks to 0. And then after this, they will pack the cars away and head towards Brands Hatch and the Grand Prix circuit. In fact, yeah, so Grand Prix circuit next up for them at Brands Hatch. Then it's the Indy circuit at Brands a month later. Then they go to Alton Park, and they're back here at Snetterton in the 8th of October. So they will be back here for rounds 11 and 12 of the championship season. So he's about to head over the start-finish line any second now. 20 seconds to go. I don't think we'll see the checkered flag this time through. So as he goes through, he is now onto his 16th and final lap of the race. Of course, because of that safety car period we had in race number 1, we only got 14 laps chalked in the book. This time, we're going to get to 16.
Yeah, looks like it'll potentially be slightly different weather when they revisit in October.
I suspect it might be, yeah.
Yeah, Norfolk in October is not the same as Norfolk in early June, is it, Mark? So, but no, it'd be amazing for them to be able to experience the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit next time out in these cars, because I think that'll be a great match for any of these Ferrari Challenge cars, or as part of the Bell Sport Challenge. And the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit is something that isn't used a huge amount through the year, so the fact that it visits that circuit is going to be a great thing for the series.
Yeah, it's good opportunity for them to race on the Brands Hatch Grand Prix circuit, as you say, because they are very limited for the amount of dates that they can utilise that circuit for. So it'd be good to see a healthy entry list. Peter Smith just working his way through the infield section, so through Hamilton and up towards the braking area for Oggies for what will be the final time. And then all he needs to deal with then is the Bentley Straight. And he is pretty much home and dry, or he's just been building that advantage all of the time, hasn't he, really? So it's been another lights to flag victory, but one which he's pushed himself. He might not have been pushed by his competitors because he got the break early on, but he certainly pushed himself. Oh,
certainly. You have to push yourself to go consistently faster for 3 or 4 or 5 laps on every single sector. You're really taking it out of yourself, and that is what's so rewarding about going motor racing, and why a lot of these drivers are probably doing this series. Is it's not just about the competition with the other drivers, either in your class or group, but also the great thing about motorsport is it's always a competition with yourself as well, because you're pretty much, it's you, it's man and machine, hopefully in harmony and not in battle.
Person and machine, of course. Yep. So
sorry, Mark. Sorry, everyone. It's person machine, of course.
Yep. So out of Murray's and over the start-finish line, we see Peter Smith is about to take victory, his 2nd of the day, and he will win round 4 of the Bell Sports Challenge Series for 2023. It's going to be quite a while before we get Darren Goes over the start-finish line, because he's going to be the best part of, 40 or 50 seconds back. But interesting to see how Matthew Wilton and Richard Dougal are getting on, because that gap has increased. It's up to about 4 seconds now by the end of the previous lap. So here comes Darren Goes now. He's still got traffic to deal with. He's dealt with Mick Dwayne's yellow 360 on the run in towards the braking area for Brundle and Nelson. And Darren Goes is going to finish in second place once more.
Yeah. Darren Goes is the two yellow Ferraris passing each other. Then it's quite cool to see the two very similarly liveried cars in a different eras of the Ferraris, both looking excellent in their own ways. But Darren Goes will be very happy with another podium, and then Wilton will be not too far back in third position.
Yep, so through comes Darren Goes over the start-finish line. Mick Dwayne secures 6th place overall, might be off the lead lap, but that's the win in Class 1, so he'll be pleased with that. Even with another spin, he still secures the class win. He did that exactly the same in the race earlier on today. So those are the 3 cars that have taken the checkered flag now. Next car to take the checkered flag is another car that was in the pits again and has come back out again, so he snuck back out. Tim Cairns, so he will finish some 5 laps off the lead in the end, but at least the car is still running. Through comes Matthew Wilton to take the checkered flag. Richard Dougal comes through to take the checkered flag, and then we've just got 2 more cars to take the checkered flag, one of which will be Giuseppe Coletti. And also taking the checkered flag now will be Michael O'Sullivan. So O'Sullivan is through to finish in 5th place. Here comes Giuseppe Coletti through, the last of the cars to take the checkered flag. So 2 dominant victories from Peter Smith. He secured victory earlier on today by 17.25 seconds. Well, that was a dominant one on its own, but this one even more dominant. 53.75 seconds just over was the winning margin in the end, and he went so much quicker than he did in the race earlier on. His fastest lap from race 1 was a 1 minute 59.3, as good as. He did a 1 minute 57 almost that time through, 1 minute 56.998. So let's confirm the results then with you as we wrap up the Bell Sports Challenge series from here at Snetterton. It's a win for Peter Smith, with Darren Goes in 2nd place, and Matthew Wilton comes through to finish in 3rd place. Class win for Richard Dougal, who finished there in 4th position. Michael O'Sullivan was there in 5th place, and Mick Dwayne also picked up his class win to finish in 6th position. Giuseppe Coletti was 7th ahead of Tim Cairns, who was there in 8th place, and into the pit lane, and I'm afraid retirement, was Nick Carey. So that is it for the Bell Sports Challenge series. They will be back out on circuit at Brands Hatch on the 8th of July on the Grand Prix circuit, but hopefully we'll be back with you to cover them later on over the course of the season. Keep your eye on the Bell Sport and Classic website for more information about further events and further streams that we'll be doing. But from everybody here at Snetterton, thanks for joining us for the 2 Bell Sports Challenge races. Hopefully we'll see you later on in the season. Goodbye.